seen each other before.
Oh, it's a bit of a worry. Nice to see you. To see you, nice. Yes,
I think we're a bit early, but I thought I'd turn it on because sometimes my computer takes a while to come to life.
Yeah, I got one of the old steam-driven ones. I used to have one of those. Yeah. 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 No, our good friend Graham is on the Isle of Wight ferry at the moment on his way home, so he's asked me to keep things going until he arrives.
Okay.
So,
how's your work on co-benefits of projects going?
it's going fine. What I'm finding at the moment, which you'll probably resonate with this, anybody doing anything in climate change is up to here with things to do, paperwork, stuff to read, and all the rest of it. So the co-benefits is definitely the way to go. And I think we've only actually from last week, Friday, was it the week before, actually got our physical hands on the Great Collaboration website. So we're now hosting it ourselves.
Okay.
So we're now getting more directly into the question of how you tell them, how you say things to people, how do you get them involved. One of our number has on the job of drafting the communications plan for what we're doing, which will of course incorporate what you've just said. And she's been up to her ears and so forth. So it's a curious thing. The other thing, what of course we're trying to do and spending quite a bit of time on doing is raising money so we can pay people to do some of this stuff. Because because there are some very necessary admin and ongoing tasks to do, which if we can find money for somebody to pay to do it, that would be brilliant because volunteering can only take you so far, particularly as there's all these other claims on people's time and so forth. But the co-benefit thing is definitely, I mean, it's like you hardly want to mention the word climate because about a third of your audience just switches off, of course, particularly those that think it's all a con anyway. So going with co-benefits is well established.
Don't you think the people that think it's a con are in the minority nowadays, though, and not worth listening?
Well, I think they're in a diminishing minority, but I went to a webinar yesterday from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. I go all over the place, and there's been some analysis done of the different viewpoints on climate. And somebody has done some work and decided that there are 7 different groups of people when you start talking about this issue, this agenda. There are the people who don't like it, mummy. They don't call it that. There are people that are really heavily into it, wanting to do something about it, perhaps people like you and me. But then there's about 5 different other groups I've identified in between. They've all got a roughly equal share of the piece. So there's potentially 7 different viewpoints you might need to think about when you're putting out publicity or addresses and stuff. So hopefully you don't have to put stuff out 7 times. Of course, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But I've not copied that slide yet, but I will do to see what we might do about it. Would that be of interest to you, Jacky? That different viewpoints.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, let me make a note of that. Okay. Hi, Sarah.
She's on mute at the moment.
Is she? Oh.
Yeah. So Andrew, I'm a fellow of the RSA. And there's a discussion at the moment about like the psychology of communications on climate change.
Right.
So I don't know whether you are involved with any of the psychological research side of things.
I went to it wasn't the RFA, it was the Royal Society, and they had something about this kind of thing, and they were saying, there needs to be a sort of shift in the way that people operate and think about things. But what they didn't really nail down, which is you need leadership to get that to happen. Shift tends not to happen on its own. And so I fed back, what about leadership? And I never heard any more about it. But I think the other thing I know is you've got people think about leadership, and they assume it's like the centurion in the Bible. I say to a man, go, and he goeth.
But it was that easy.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I was taught some while ago that there are actually 4 different bits. There's telling, there's selling, in other words, encouraging somebody to do something. There's delegating, in other words, giving it to somebody to do. That's part of leadership. And then there's participating, you're doing it with somebody. I mean, all of those are different forms of leadership, and all of them apply in different circumstances. If you're going to be really neat as a leader, then you'll perhaps have able to use all of them. Hi, Jools. Welcome. Yeah, Jools is us speaker for today. Yes, we're just talking about different audiences, Jules. How there are different segments of society that have different views on climate change on the one hand, and different ways of speaking to them on the other. Have you come across this thing that there are 7 different groups that somebody has analysed?
Is that the More in Common report?
I'm not sure. It might be. I heard it during the body of a Centre for Sustainable Energy presentation yesterday, and I haven't downloaded it yet. But they showed a wheel with 7 different segments.
It's possibly the More in Common report. It's a really useful analysis actually, because it shows that even right across the political spectrum, there is interest and an appetite for engaging with this topic, but as you say, perhaps handling it differently.
Oh yes, well yes. I mean there are still parish council chairmen, as we all know, that just are in complete denial of the whole thing. I think it's some sort of plot. They probably also think that the COVID vaccines are designed to have a takeover by Mr. Microsoft. But anyway, never mind. At all of those. There we go. So we'll wait a couple of minutes more. Our friend Graham is on the Isle of Wight ferry at the moment. We used to tell stories about that, but we won't tell them now. And he will be here as soon as he might do once he's climbed up the hill, whatever else he does. So I'm your pro sub vice temporary assistant alternative chairman for the next short whiles. But it's a great pleasure to be here as ever. As people are coming on by. I'm understanding, I haven't been able to get to every one of these sessions. But I'm appreciating that there are some of us who are becoming aficionados and are coming to them regularly. We do try and promote them as much as we can to get more people on board. And we will be having, this is being recorded, we will be having these sessions posted through the Great Collaboration website so that people can see them, can still get the benefit of all our talks and discussions, and then can be encouraged to come along to the next one. As I was just saying to Jacky just now, as part of the effort we're doing with the Great Collaboration, we are seeking some funding to get some paid staff in, at least on part-time basis, to do some of this promoting and also writing up and dealing with the website and so forth. In the meantime, we're getting on with it, but because we're doing it with about a dozen of us volunteers, some things are taking a little bit longer than others. But it doesn't mean to say it ain't happening or we're giving up. So we'll see some more about that in due course. So where are we? Give it another couple of minutes. What I think I should do, Jules, you've got a presentation you wanted to share, haven't you?
I have.
Do you want to test that you can actually share screen? Should we do a little test?
Yeah, that sounds.
Drum roll. Yes, okay.
Just to
test that it works. And I don't have to click on something here. You should be able to do it without any grief. The My Share Screen button doesn't have any extra bits, so I assume that means we can all share stuff. Not happening?
Bear with me.
Right, that's okay.
It's looking a bit funny, actually.
I'll just see if I can share something. Let's see if that
hang on
takes the system.
I need to change my settings.
Okay, well, I can certainly share stuff. So if all else fails, Jules, you can whiz it to me and I'll share it, because it'll let me do it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I can do it. It was cover.
Yeah, I've got it working now. Bear with me. I'm getting there. Okay. Just take a moment.
Ah,
that working?
It is indeed. We have liftoff. 20 minutes past the hour. Confidence is high. I repeat, there you are. Tristam's laughing because he remembers all this stuff from NASA when the moonshots and the landings and things were going on. I think even Stuart can remember it, but there we are. Why, our physics teacher at school said, why aren't you looking at this every night? You know, we'd seen the first one. Oh, it's all whole hat now. He said, you should be glued to this every night. This is, oh, right, never mind. Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome indeed to today's banter session. As I say, our regular chairman, Graham, will be joining us shortly. He's rushing to get off the Isle of Wight ferry at the moment to get home. Hopefully he's not swimming for the shore, but at any rate, he will be with us in due non. It's a great pleasure to me to introduce Jools Townsend to you, all those who've not already met her. Jools is here as Chief Executive of the Community Rail Network, and that organisation is also part of the a wider network on unsustainable transport, and so that's the topic for today. Cara, you have your hand up straight away. How can we help?
Sorry, it's just to say, Jules, you've got yours in sort of presenter mode, so we can see the next slide that's coming up.
Oh, have I? I was going to check. Thank you.
But looking forward to it anyway.
I think we've got to.
Oh,
Thank
there we
you.
go. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, we don't want people's attention straying to the next slide. For heaven's sake. We spend enough time doing these effortful slides. Anyway, so Jules, if you'd like to say a bit more about yourself, and then we're looking forward to having your talk. Go for it.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I'm glad it's working now. So as you can see, and as you've heard, I'm Jools Townsend. I'm Chief Executive of the Community Rail Network. So we're a national not-for-profit organisation working across Britain to support communities to get involved with their railways. And increasingly, we're supporting work which goes right across the sustainable transport field. And I'll be giving you some examples of that. I should also mention that I have served myself as a local councillor for a number of years and been a local volunteer and campaigner. So bringing a range of experience to this presentation. And I've got quite a few slides with quite a lot of information on, which I've left as is in the hope that Andrew will share them afterwards. There's various links that you can click on for more information to refer back to. But if I go through, I will rattle through quite quickly so we've got time for discussion. And if there's anything you're wanting me to expand on in the discussion, obviously you can ask when we come on to that. So a bit about the why. Why do we need to engage and involve and empower communities in regards to sustainable transport and travel? So I'm guessing that probably people around the virtual table will be aware that transport is now the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. It's the fastest rising source of emissions globally. And we frankly have a bit of a problem with transport in that the emissions are not falling, and they haven't fallen for a number of years, as you can see from the graph on the left, which is what's meant transport has now overtaken energy as the biggest source of emissions. The main reason that emissions in transport haven't fallen is that despite the fact that we've got more efficient improved efficiency in terms of engines, and despite some electrification of the railways, some electrification of the road vehicle fleet, we have and continue to see a long-term trend of rising traffic levels on our roads. And you may be aware as well from recent news reports, we're also seeing bigger and bigger vehicles on our roads. And those two long-term trends are cancelling out the gains that have been made through increased engine efficiency and partial electrification. You can have a look, by the way, I've included a link at the bottom of this slide. You can have a look at what the statistics are like in your area using the tool that's linked there. And I want to emphasise this point that electrification of transport is not enough. We need to change transport behaviours, and that is patently clear from a range of evidence showing that electrification will only get us so far. So we can't just keep moving around in the same ways and just electrify the road fleet, electrify the railways, electrify the buses. We need to have a shift in the way we get around. And there's been in recent years an emerging consensus that we need about a quarter reduction in private car kilometres by 2030 if transport is to decarbonise in line with our net zero targets. That consensus started to emerge. That quote that's on this slide, it was from a couple of years ago. We haven't made progress thus far on that. Obviously, as we get further along, we need action to be more drastic and more dramatic. So we've got a lot that we need to do in the coming years if transport is going to decarbonise at the rate we now need. And we are starting to see some recognition at devolved government level within some of the city regions that we do need that shift in transport behaviours, and some are starting to adopt targets to reduce car kilometres, and that may well be applicable where you are. But on top of that, this isn't just about decarbonisation, and I guess this is probably a cross-cutting theme across these sessions. The huge benefits that are on offer, actually, if we do see this shift in transport behaviours, in terms of improving public health, in terms of creating more equitable access to opportunity, in terms of improving our local places and spaces. There's so much we have to gain from making this change towards more sustainable mobility and transport. And I know there have been some sessions, I believe the last session was on electric vehicle charging points. I just want to unpick that point a little bit more, that electric cars are not a silver bullet within transport. They're not going to get us where we need to be. Even the most optimistic projections for rolling out electric cars, even if they come true, there is still this major shift in behaviours needed. And actually, electric cars don't fix a lot of the other problems associated with car-dominated development and mobility. Electric cars, of course, all sorts of affordability issues, and therefore not accessible to large parts of the population, therefore not an equitable pathway for decarbonising transport. They still take up huge amounts of public space, up to 40–50% of our public space in more urban areas taken up by parked cars or space for vehicles to move around. They still produce particulate pollution from the brakes and the tyres. So still contributing to this major public health issue that we have with air pollution. And still contributing to sedentary lifestyles and road safety issues. And hence, we have what is known as the sustainable transport hierarchy, and there's various iterations that you can find of this online. This is Transport Scotland's version, pictured on the right of this slide. And the private car is bottom of the pile. The most sustainable forms of travel are active travel, followed by, for longer journeys where active travel isn't feasible, public transport, followed by shared mobility where multiple people using the same vehicles, followed by the private car. From a decarbonisation perspective, modal shift onto public transport, and I think this is massively underappreciated, also offers deep, rapid carbon reductions. People are often surprised by these statistics, which we use at Community Rail Network, showing the carbon savings of shifting 30 mile long journeys from car onto rail. With longer journeys still, the carbon savings are greater still. So from Edinburgh to London, if you go by train instead of car, you're saving more than 90% of the carbon footprint. The savings for bus are not quite as high, but still pretty respectable. So if you shift a journey from car onto an electric bus, it's about a 75% reduction. And actually, even small changes by individual households, particularly when we're talking about longer journeys, can mean overall very significant reductions in emissions. So just each household switching just one longer journey per month onto public transport can mean a big carbon saving overall. The cumulative difference is quite significant. And just worth mentioning, the longer journeys, of course, are the most polluting. Often when we think about sustainable travel, we immediately think about walking and cycling for those shorter journeys. But of course, it's the longer journeys cutting across different local authority areas which are the most polluting, and where we can make the biggest gains most rapidly. So what works in achieving modal shift? There's a whole raft of research available on behaviour change, on sustainability generally, and specifically looking at transport behaviours. Can I just ask, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback, I don't know if everyone's on mute, if everyone could mute themselves, that would be really great. Thank you. I'm just easily distracted. So what works? Lots of research out there and all sorts of different opinions, and this is all boiled down to a few key takeaway points on this slide. There's often a lot of emphasis when we think about changing behaviours on choice. We often talk about getting people to make better choices, getting individuals to make better choices, and I would suggest actually that that's quite a reductive, quite a simplistic take on how behaviour change takes place. We need to acknowledge that generally, particularly when it comes to transport, people aren't waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, how shall I travel today? These behaviours are deeply embedded, ingrained habits that people aren't really thinking too much about. And even if they were to think about them, the options open to them are often greatly constrained by both practical and psychological and cultural barriers and inhibitors. So these are not behaviours that are subject to free and independent and conscious choices. Really important that we think about the car as being really deeply embedded in people's lifestyles and in society. And hence, we actually need to think about really bringing people together and helping people to change together, helping families to change together, helping communities to change together, and creating a sense of momentum, creating a sense of ownership around the change, and creating a feeling that, you know, we can do this, we can change together. When we point the finger at individuals and suggest that individuals need to make better choices, we're often kind of putting too much onus on the shoulders of individuals, and that can be off-putting. So much better that we think about social solutions that bring people together and enable collective change, and at the same time listening to people, understanding what the barriers are, both practical barriers and the ones in people's heads and people's hearts, and we work together to break those barriers down. And I'll come on to some of the ways that we can do that. So engagement is important because it enables us to bring people together, help people change together, and it enables us to understand what the local barriers and inhibitors are and break those down. So a bit about Community Rail and what we're doing to address some of these challenges. Community Rail is a grassroots movement spread across Britain. It's made up of 77 community rail partnerships. These are small community-based organisations working along railway lines, plus about 1,200 Station Friends volunteer groups, carrying out all sorts of different activities involving communities with the railway. And broadly speaking, you know, it's about helping communities get as much benefit as possible from their railways, including by using them. But also feeding into rail industry partners and other transport partners on local needs and improvements. So creating that dialogue and that mutual understanding between local communities and the railways. Oh, next slide. Oh, that was strange. I really like this quote from one of the volunteers involved at Glossop Station. Really kind of sums up how community rail is kind of normalising rail use and bringing people in using those social solutions. Just let you read that. And I think a really important point that John makes here is how trains and I'd say public transport generally really have become another world for probably the majority of people within our local communities, and we need to deal with that. We need to rebuild that familiarity as a key method. Community rail works. We have lots of evidence that it's delivering really important impacts, contributing to stronger passenger growth and recovery since the pandemic, in terms of local railway lines being better used, and delivering lots of social value, and lots of positive impacts for local places and people's lives at the same time. So what is Community Rail doing? I wanted to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the sorts of initiatives that happen in Community Rail that help to bring about and support and encourage these more sustainable transport behaviours. So recruiting people socially. So how does Community Rail do that? We use stations and we use railways as sites for creative activities, social events, placemaking activities. We're literally bringing people into the station, which can be a unfamiliar place, as I've just mentioned, for a lot of people. Arts projects such as this one pictured here, really enabling this community to put their stamp on a station and feel that sense of ownership towards it. Having fun, and doing so using the station and fun activities using the railway itself. Another example pictured here is the bucket and spade trains that happen, run by Essex and South Suffolk CRP. They're taking families on a fun day out to the seaside, giving them that taste of rail travel. It's not obviously about modal shift, but lots of these families haven't been on a train for years or rarely so in the past, and they're given that really positive experience that encourages them to keep using the train going forward. Lots of campaigns and communications as well that draw on local stories and histories, and really show the railway to be part of the community. Lots of activities are based around breaking down perceptual barriers, building familiarity, building rail confidence and skills, which we often find is lacking, particularly among children and young people these days, who are often growing up in very car-dependent households or households with limited mobility horizons. So giving children and young people, again, a taste of rail, a positive experience, helping them understand how to buy tickets, how to negotiate the system. Not just children and young people, but working with families, working with older people, working with groups who may otherwise feel excluded from the railway, and helping them to think about the opportunities and experiences that they can access using rail. And often we find that has really transformative benefits, in terms of people realising that they can get out there and do things that they perhaps otherwise thought unattainable. Breaking down practical barriers, also, and these things, they often go hand in hand. So we're building familiarity, but we're also listening to people and understanding what are the practical inhibitors in terms of them using rail and sustainable travel more generally. Helping people with diverse lived experience to influence change within the railways or within their local communities. Modal integration, a really key focus, a growing focus for us, pulling partners together to think about how we can join up timetabling and infrastructure and ticketing, so that buses and trains and community transport and shared mobility schemes and active travel work seamlessly. They generally don't at the moment. I'm sure it's something that you will all be acutely aware of in your local areas. And sometimes within Community Rail, we can put in place projects to plug the gaps as well, such as seasonal bus services, new shared bike or bike share or car share schemes at stations, for example. So I want to just briefly touch on, I'm mindful of the time, an example that I implemented when I was myself a village councillor. I stepped down just because I moved house move to a different area. But while I was on Harden Village Council, I ran a project which drew on some of these insights and experiences from within Community Rail. So I wanted to share that and show how some of these ideas can be put into practice by a local council. So this project, we actually pulled together 4 local councils acknowledging that transport is very much a cross-boundary issue. A lot of our traffic in Harden was coming from our neighbouring villages and towns. We thought it made sense to work together. That also enabled us to pull in funding from a climate action fund that was available at the time to deliver a local engagement project. And the idea of this project was really to get local people thinking about sustainable travel, what it might mean in our local areas, and talking about it. And actually, I think that's a really important first step. Here's a summary of what we did. We ran communications throughout, really empowering messages, emphasising this point that we were listening. We wanted to hear what people had to say. We ran surveys online and in person. We really got out there within the local community. We ran roadshows, went to local community events, talked to people, heard from them. We recorded all of that. We fed that into a series of mapping workshops that we ran online in partnership with a social enterprise called Mapping for Change, who really, really good at doing participatory mapping exercises, which is really relevant in transport, I think. We worked with Sustrans, I should say, on the road shows. We created an online map that would enable people to continually feed in their perceptions and issues and concerns with local sustainable travel. And we created a promotional map as well to celebrate the assets that we already had, local routes and opportunities for accessing local spaces using sustainable travel. And we fed everything that we found in to local transport authorities, bus operators, West Yorkshire Combined Authority, in order to try to also influence the bigger things that we didn't have direct control over as a local council. It's a few images of our roadshows. That's our online map that we set up, which is still there, which you can have a look at. Some of the communications we put out, and our promotional map celebrating, really showing how you could get around and access our local spaces and places using sustainable travel. So I'm going to start wrapping up, conscious of not wanting to, I might be overrunning very slightly. Key principles. We need a greater focus on modal integration, particularly in rural areas. You probably don't need me to tell you that, but I would just encourage that you don't think about any one mode, think about the whole system. We're called community rail, but we are increasingly thinking about how rail fits into that wider sustainable travel ecosystem and trying to join up the dots. Engagement and empowerment is really key to achieving, it can help us achieve simultaneously behaviour change and the systems change that will feed into each other. Recognise and harness local knowledge, really listen to people, draw on those local insights, draw on the local enthusiasm and goodwill, work with local campaigners and local groups, and co-create solutions. Really important that we don't impose things from on high. Opportunities to work together, very briefly. Community rail is increasingly widespread. Have a look at our map, see if there's an existing community rail partnership in your area or a station friends group. If there's not, we're happy to work with you to help set something up. And generally, we can help to build links with the rail industry, transport authorities, and we can support on the local engagement side. Do feel free to draw on our materials, which I've linked to throughout this presentation. And I will stop there. So we've got time for discussion. I hope I've not overrun too much.
Not at all. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, thanks so much, Jools. And this, so many of the talks and presentations I've been to lately are showing a very similar thing, which is about communication, engagement, and it's the way you tell them. And I think these are the things that are going across the whole piece. But thank you very much for all of that. Lots of hands in there. We'll start with John Fagan.
Hi, first thanks to Amanda Davis for inviting me today. I didn't know about your banter that you have. I recognise a few people on there from the community. Yeah, so I thought I might share a couple of things because I actually used to work in this. I used to work for a company called Axel Vibe, and we were building a sat-nav for public transport. So that's moving people from door to door and not station to stations. So that's solving the first mile, last mile problem, the modal integration thing that Jools talked about. And that's connecting mass public transport with shared and micro mobility. And we're working with various agencies all around the world. I also currently CEO of Scribe, and we provide a bunch of apps and stuff for town and parish councils. But I do a talk on public transport. I can share a few things because it's very relevant to this. But if you've got 5 minutes, but it starts with, like, I totally agree with electric cars are not the silver bullet, and the physics of it are a big problem for me because the average payload is 70 kgs. That's the average weight of a person. And electric cars are heavier than normal, cars with internal combustion engines. They're 15 to 2,000 kilograms. So it's totally inefficient. The payload's like 3 to 4% of the total weight you're trying to move. So I'm really interested in the micro mobility space and all these businesses trying to kind of unbundle the journey. I love this slide, the total journey. So there's a whole bunch of startups. I've got loads of logos there that are basically trying to find the right vehicle for the right job, depending on the journey that you need to do. And that goes into not only, we talked about mass public transport today, but micro transit I'm very interested in, and also micro mobility. I mean, I can go into more detail and all that stuff, but yeah, I'll leave it to you guys if you want to know any more, think more.
Many thanks, John, and we may come back to you about all of that, either to give us a talk or certainly to share some of that, some of those thoughts more widely. Thank you so much. Great, Stuart.
Hi, I'd like to thank Jools for a very interesting and entertaining talk. There's certainly a lot to think about. I was wondering if you could help me, though. I've been trying to reconnect an old railway line as an active travel route between three quite large conurbations. The track itself is owned by Essex County Council, who I've been trying to work with for, say, about 10 years. All their investment for active travel has gone into the large conurbations, and nobody seems at all interested in connecting up the countryside with the transport hubs. My route has a railway station at each end and a big transport hub at Stansted in the middle, neither of which are directly connected. Is that something Community Rail would be interested in helping with?
Yes, yeah, I think the interest to be there. Whether we can solve all those problems, I don't know. But I would suggest that you reach out to Essex and South Suffolk Community Rail Partnership. They're actually hosted by Essex County Council, and I believe that Essex County Council have now dedicated resource on sustainable travel. But I completely hear you that I think across the board, we have a major issue with all the focus and resource going into getting people in and out of urban areas, and inadequate attention to rural spaces. And it's problematic on a number of counts, not least, and I think perhaps this is a key argument actually that local councils can be putting to transport authorities, that it is the longer journeys, it's leisure journeys that tend to make up the biggest part of a household's carbon footprint. So the journeys between urban and rural spaces are really important, those longer leisure journeys. So if you can make the case actually that you want to reduce some of those really polluting longer leisure journeys, it can add weight to your argument. It's probably not, it's not a magic wand, but it's something. But I think, yeah, generally there's also a piece of work that is being led by Transport East on rural mobility, which should benefit those of you in the Anglian region in particular, I would think.
Well, I have been in contact with Transport East.
Right.
Sent them a copy of our outline business case. They are fully aware of us. And as far as I can tell, just about all rural cycling routes have been completely ignored.
Yeah. Have a chat with the Community Rail Partnership, particularly because the route is joined at railway stations at both ends. There can be something around pooling resourcing from different places. Community Rail does have specific Community Rail funding pots available to it, including from the railways, although it's very constrained at the moment. But you know, there is something around pulling together funds from different sources. I'm sure I'm expecting you're already in touch with Sustrans as well,
Yes.
who a particular role around walking and cycling routes on disused railway lines. But yeah,
well, but part of the route is actually NCN, National Cycle
already
Network.
NCN.
But again, Sustrans just turn around and say we haven't got any funding.
Yeah, it's very difficult at the moment on the funding front, but as I say, all the more important that we pull together as many partners as we can and try and pull funding from different sources.
Thank you. And just whilst I've got a platform, I'd like to thank John for his contribution. Something we have been doing in Essex is an on-demand electric minibus, which when it works, it's brilliant. But quite often I've tried to use it and end up stuck in some remote area.
I had an example of you doing it. This one is I think this is one of those examples. There is Essex.
I think we're going to ask for a copy of your slides, please, John. There we go.
No,
there's an example in Suffolk as well, which is partly run by a Community Rail Partnership, providing demand responsive electric minibuses connecting local communities with their local railway stations. So yeah, and I was going to come back on some of John's points as well, actually, that we work very closely with Como UK, who are a bit like us. They're a national umbrella body supporting bike share and car share. So yeah, and we're very mindful of the opportunities of bringing micro mobility schemes in connecting railway stations with local places, especially in more rural areas where the bus services have been cut or no longer exist at all. Right. Plugging those gaps.
All very good stuff. As Stuart also knows, we're preparing to have an East Anglia regional pilot, and all this joining up through the great collaboration. So there's some very useful contacts here for that exercise, which some of us are talking about this afternoon. Brilliant. Amanda.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jools, for your presentation, and hello from Hannah McDonnell over here in Gloucestershire, the Community Rail Partnership, and also they kind of not expanded, but they've facilitated the Oxford partnership as well. So things are expanding and getting stronger and stronger over here from Gloucestershire across to Oxfordshire. That's the patch that I know. I'm a board member, as some people who are regularly on here know, with Cotswold National Landscape. And so as many of us would know it as an AONB. And so we cover more than one county. In fact, we've got 6 to 8 counties, depending on whether you look at those just outside our geography. And getting around the Cotswolds, one of the very most visited places in Britain, we have so many tourists come visiting, day trippers. It's a big one for us because we have railway stations all the way around the Cotswolds, but very few actually in it. And we could go on forever, but because this is a group that shares, there's a few things on here I wanted to contribute, but then also it's kind of partly of Jools wanted to come back. And John, thank you for attending today, and hopefully into the future feel very welcome. So the calm corners on railway stations was something that we funded. When I say we, I mean Cotswold National Landscape, through DEFRA funding, to experiment with and see where it would be best located and whether it would get used, etc. I love that idea that people who, for whatever reason, a railway station may be triggering, it may be uncomfortable, it may not be the most helpful place, and yet they need to go there to get onto a train. And so the idea that they would have somewhere that would enable them to get on that train. And I foster guide dogs, so an example would be a calm place that I could take the guide dog to sit and wait for the train, and every time another train goes by that isn't mine, doesn't frighten the poor dog and me. I used to be a station friend up in Northumberland, and I thoroughly recommend it to anybody that's near enough to a railway station or a bus station or anything that you want to. But it's this idea of making it a community space and not just something for vehicles. It's turning it around so that it's people focused rather than the vehicle focus. Also, Cotswold National Landscape, we had a board meeting yesterday where 3 Keel Consulting presented the Cotswold National Landscape route map to net zero by 2050. So this is looking at how do you join up something like 6 to 8 counties with their travel, with their environmental, and their everything about how do we operate, where we want to go out and socialize, we want to get to work, we want to live, and yet at the same time we want to, so in other words, a manageable, enjoyable but changed behavior so that we can get to net zero in a realistic way that actually happens and doesn't just leave it all to 2049 and then we'll worry about it then. But the big one for us really is coaches. Oh, and while I'm still doing the sharing facts, the Robin here in the North Cotswolds and over in the Forest of Dean, and Gloucestershire County Council have just got some more money to expand it. The Robin is our demand responsive EV minibus system. So if anybody else is interested in one that's been up and running long enough to learn lessons from, then Gloucestershire is a good example now. And if we don't already have links on the Great Collaboration Database, then we can certainly provide those. So the 3 Keel Consulting report was accepted yesterday at Cotswold National Landscape, and I hope that we can, if I can get permission to make that go public, the whole point of it is to go public with it, then here would be a good place to present it, share it, etc. And my question, I will only end on the question, is around coaches. So we have a tremendous number of coaches coming to Bourton-on-the-Water, and our coach park, which is privately operated, has just closed. So we now have nowhere for coaches to come to Bourton. And the big dilemma is let's just say one level of our local authorities is saying very firmly, coaches are like great big cruise liners to Venice. You know, they're not a good thing to be encouraging going around the Cotswolds to the number that they are. They're great for the people on board, but they're not necessarily great in the round. And yet we've got some, I'm told is it carbon positive coaches in the fleets around us, which means that the air coming out of them is cleaner than the air going in, albeit that the other bits and pieces don't mean that they're net positive. You know, the brakes, the things we've been talking about perhaps. So my question is, should we say, okay, this is a great time to address the issue and not encourage coaches to Bourton? Or should we say, actually, coaches are a really efficient way of getting lots of people around. They're going to come anyway, so let's facilitate it and embrace it and encourage it. So I just would like to pose that with you and be quiet now. Thank you.
I mean, my question would be, how else do people get there? How else can people get there? Is it coach or car?
Well, we have Moreton-in-Marsh railway station being the gateway into the Cotswolds, and then we've got the main Fossway Road where there's a public transport. Every hour there's a bus down. Otherwise it's public transport. It's private car.
Yeah. So I would say that you absolutely do not want to invite a situation where you are saying no to the coaches and just letting more cars in, because that's 10 times worse in every regard. I'd be working with the coach operators and thinking about why are people het up about the coaches going around the Cotswolds? Why is that seen as unsustainable? and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying, you know, what are the problems with that, and can those problems be addressed? So people are being brought in by coach, and maybe thinking about making greater use of the railway as well. And great to hear that you're working with Gloucestershire Community Rail Partnership already. But for me, I would suggest, you know, have a really strong focus on getting people in via alternative means to the car. Don't demonise the coach. It's a lot more sustainable than driving. So perhaps just unpicking what the specific issues are. But I think a broader point, I would really strongly encourage that it's a topic of discussion at one of these sessions, specifically looking at incoming visitors and enabling people to access national landscapes, any kind of attraction, leisure attraction, green space, that's a trip generator in your local area. You know, I would say that's a whole topic of discussion in its own right. It was something we thought about with our Bingley Rural Green Travel project. We were conscious that, although not on the scale of the Cotswolds, a lot of our traffic was people coming into the area and particularly visiting a country estate and a couple of other green spaces in the area. So we were conscious of talking to visitors and understanding that better, and how we could get people in as well as moving people about within our area more sustainably.
Thanks for that, Jules. Yes, I've made a note about that. That sounds good stuff.
Andrew,
Sorry.
can I briefly just say that Blenheim Palace offers a discount if you go on public transport. So that's
right.
a prime example of what Jules just mentioned.
Well, how about that? Yes. Gosh, I haven't been there for a while. Oh, that's a nice move. Yes. I think there's still an organisation for the larger heritage attractions in this nation, isn't there? So perhaps we should speak with them as well. Cara, you've been patient.
Thanks. Sorry, I think we're so. I just want to say it's like taking it out of order. I actually think David's before me, but I'm happy to go if David wants to wait. There is a way to see which order people put their hands up, but don't worry, I'm happy to jump in because I talk a lot. But I will go. I was just want to say thank you very much for your presentation. And in rural Somerset, we really struggle. Although there are 10 railway stations across the county, we're a very far and dispersed community. And there are two issues in order to access railway. One, there's a long standing, probably third generation campaign in the Langport and Somerton area, trying to get support to reinstate a railway station. It's the longest stretch of rail without a railway station on it. And on average, people drive about 15 miles to get to a railway station. So in some cases, you're halfway to your destination. So people don't and can't access the railway. And when they do, there's a real issue around affordability as well for many people in rural situations, which again is why the car is still ruling as that first go-to form of transport. Although we are trying to trial e-scooters, you'll be pleased to hear my colleague on the call, in some of the bigger sort of towns of Somerset. But for us, you know, rail would be something we'd like to be able to do, but we just find it very difficult. Is it something that, Jules, you and your team help to support in those campaigns to bring back railway stations? And do you know about the Langport Somerton campaign? There's also Wellington trying to get in the lower part of the county reinstate a railway station there, and there's Go Up, which is a cooperative service looking to provide community-led rail service in the southwest, encompassing most of Somerset. So we've got aspirations, but we are far from being able to make rail our priority form of transport. And just wondered what your organisation can help enhance and support the delivery of more railways, and also to bring down prices to make it more affordable for more people to use.
Yeah, no, really good questions. So we predominantly support groups and organisations that are engaging with rail where it exists already. However, there is invariably often a lot of crossover and overlap. Can you still hear me okay? It's just my picture's frozen.
Yeah.
Coming through. Okay, great. Where we've got local community rail partnerships and local campaigns for rail reopenings, whether it's new stations or lines being reinstated, that there is invariably overlap and links between the two. And we have got various examples of community rail partnerships that have played a really important role in supporting the case for a rail reopening. It's difficult though, because it's such an incredibly expensive endeavour, reopening a railway that's been closed. So the government has had a programme called Restoring Your Railway, which many of our members have been involved in local campaigns in different parts of the country. Yeah, the economic environment we're in at the moment means it takes a long time, and it's often difficult making the case because it's just so incredibly expensive reinstating a railway.
Which is mad, in my opinion. Sorry to cut across you, Jules, but the railway exists. There are trains going up and down it, so you're not having to change that. You just need a way to stop. And in one case, the original railway platform is still there. So
yeah,
we've
so
got all the parts. You're like, how can it be millions of pounds to put one in? And we've got central government have for several times in their annual statement said we are supporting rail, and Langport, Somerton will be one, and still nothing is happening.
I can't answer all those questions because I'm not representative of the government, and I agree with you on lots of those points. It's still really expensive because of all the safety regulations, which are really important. Obviously, it's less expensive if there's stuff there already that can be built out and developed. But there are other organisations that have got a more dedicated focus on reopenings. There's Rail Future, which supports rail user groups and rail reopening campaigns, and there's also a campaign for better transport. It's worth making sure that they're linked in.
Yeah, I just think all of those have been engaged in some way or another, and yet it's another 10 years and still with all those promises it's still not happening, which is very frustrating. But then the second point is about how can we make it more affordable.
So the affordability point, I think, really important. I didn't really mention this. I talked about a lot of community rail activities with families, young people, children, disadvantaged groups, working to build rail confidence and rail skills. Part of that is about often working with people to help them understand how they can access more affordable tickets. I completely understand that you shouldn't have to have a degree in railway ticketing to be able to work the system. It shouldn't be like this. You should automatically get the cheapest fare available. But within the system that we're in, it's partially about raising awareness and helping people understand whether they might be able to buy tickets in advance, whether they might be able to make use of rail cards. Sometimes we find that people, and this applies more in some parts of the country than others, sometimes people think the railway is actually more expensive than it turns out to be. So sometimes the perceptions and the realities are a little bit out of sync. But partly it is about us helping people to negotiate the system. We do then feed all of that in. So as a national organisation, we make use of the experiences and the feedback that our members are getting at a local level, and we feed that into the rail industry and to the Department for Transport. And we have been part of, amongst many organisations that have been saying for many years that we need reform of the ticketing system to make it simpler and with attention to affordability. There is absolutely an issue with the fact that fuel duty has been frozen for many, many years. It's become relatively speaking, it's become cheaper to drive over the years, and it's become more and more expensive to get the train. That's obviously totally out of sync with what we need to do in terms of shifting behaviours, and in terms of making sure that everyone can use public transport and access the opportunities that they want. So yeah, we're doing what we can as an organisation, but sometimes there are opportunities to introduce local ticketing schemes. So we have had members in a few parts of the country that have introduced ticketing schemes that meet local residents' needs. In a couple of cases, combining different modes of transport. So you have one ticket for one day across different modes. So it may be their scope for introducing local solutions to help as well. And again, Community Rail is happy to be involved in that.
Lovely job. Many thanks. Lots of questions, lots of answers. Brilliant. David, and then we've got Lisa after David. David.
Right. I was interested at the mapping you talked about. How would I find out more about how you did the community mapping and who did it?
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat to Mapping for Change, which is a social enterprise who they are dedicated to delivering local level community engagement with mapping as part of that. And I think there's lots of examples on their website of projects and initiatives that they have run. They can obviously they're not free, but they are a social enterprise. They can be brought in to projects, but there is a price tag. There's lots of great examples that you can learn from on their website. There was also in my slides a link through, I hope, to more information on the Bingley Rural Green Travel Project and further detail on what we did. So you can access that. But really, I mean, mapping it sounds complicated, but I mean, we essentially we brought people together and we looked at a map of our local area and we talked about what was good, what was not so good, where the issues were, where the local assets were, where people were travelling to and from. So it can be as simple as that, just having a discussion with a map in front of you and putting in your ideas, your concerns, your and the positive points as well.
And who did that? Was that the transport group or the parish council?
So the Bingley Rural Green Travel Project, I coordinated it on a voluntary basis across 4 parish councils.
Oh, okay.
We led it, we used a steering group to manage it. And we brought in funding from a climate action fund to deliver it. And we commissioned effectively Sustrans to do the engagement work and the roadshows and the surveying. And we commissioned Mapping for Change to do the mapping workshops for us. And as I say, there's a link to Mapping for Change in the chat.
Lovely job. Well done. Very much. Thanks. I believe you might have to escape at 1 o'clock, Jules, but we've got another question from Lisa. If any of us want to stay a bit later than 1 o'clock and have a chat about other things, that's very possible. But Lisa, you're on.
Thanks. I hope you can't hear that drilling in the background. I've got some work going on. There was a presentation that I was at from GWR, and they were talking about installing batteries on some of their trains to give them a jump section from electrified section to electrified section, so that they can start really making that change to electrifying the change, even though there's breaks in the rail, which would otherwise require diesel trains to be used. I heard that last year. But the other point I've got is coming back to electric vehicles, and I had, as we all do, a bit of a learning curve when I got mine, to find out that even though the energy efficiency from battery to wheel is about 4 times as much as with an internal combustion engine, it's only when I bought that and I could compare the electricity volume and that amount that I use in my house with the amount that I put in my car, and to see that my car, it's only Golf size, it's not a big car, and on weights, a Golf size EV is 2.2 tons, so they are quite a bit heavier. But the capacity that I've got in my battery is 58 kilowatts. That would run my house for more than a week. So I think that would really help people understand just how inefficient we are when we move ourselves around in a private car.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And yeah, John made the point earlier about the private car use is inherently an incredibly inefficient way to move people around. The average car occupancy in this country is 1.4 people person, so just over one person on average. So we've got these enormous vehicles, incredibly heavy, increasingly heavy. Vehicle sizes have increased enormously over the years, often moving around one person. The space that takes up, the resources, the materials that takes up, it's the embodied carbon, so the carbon that goes into the manufacture of these vehicles, is very considerable and not something that's actually being taken into proper account. The embodied carbon in electric cars is actually more than that for internal combustion engine cars. So it's all sorts of issues, using non-renewable resources that are very often mined in ecologically fragile places, all sorts of environmental issues with massively scaling up electric cars if it's done on a private basis. But if we find ways to share those vehicles, to share those resources, actually that becomes quite a different proposition.
Yeah, and if we had community car poll cars that would, you know, have a mass of cars that would have a range of 80 miles, that's more than adequate for most people day to day. But if they also had a smaller pool of cars that had a range of 500 miles, I think we'd get over this risk of people thinking, oh, well, I need an electric vehicle with a massive range because once a year I go on holiday. But if they had easy access to an alternative vehicle that had that capacity, I think we could go change around what we're using and use EVs with much lower capacity.
Yeah,
but also I am going to interject because I've been working in EVs for a while, and there's a lot of sort of demystifying information out there, some of which I am going to challenge, because also you can convert existing fossil fuel cars to electric vehicles. Electric vehicle batteries, when they get lower capacity, which takes some time, actually much longer than there was initially predicted, are being used for renewable energy storage and also powering some of our overly subscribed services that we use a lot of digital technology. A lot of the vehicle manufacturers actually generating renewable energy to power those plants as well. So actually that is reducing. I've been in electric vehicles that use plant-based materials for a lot of the interiors. So again, moving away from more highly carbon-based interiors and other parts. So electric vehicles, I agree with you, Jules, are not the silver bullets to survive, but we do need to rapidly electrify our transport in whatever form it is, whether it's trains, buses, coaches, individuals, and demand response and community electrification of those said vehicles would be even more helpful for us to get away from self-ownership of vehicles.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to Lisa by saying that our experience when we ran the Bingley Rural Green Travel Project, and I should have mentioned, you know, these are very highly car dependent communities. So Hart and the village I was in, 90% car ownership. And I think that's another point, actually, is it is worth really appreciating that even in very car dependent communities, there will be a proportion of the community that does not have access to a car, and they tend to be lowest income, most excluded and vulnerable groups. And those are the people that will actually gain the most by improving sustainable travel. And I think we often forget that really important point. But our experience of engaging local communities, even in these very car dependent areas, is that people were not kind of horrified at this idea of us talking about using cars less. People didn't, you know, recoil in horror. And I think sometimes we worry that people will. If we approach this topic in a really engaging and empowering way, we have these conversations about solutions that will work for local people and serve local needs, people are really willing to have those conversations and explore different innovations and different options that could work, that could enable people to use their car less, perhaps have fewer cars per household, perhaps even do away with the car altogether one day. And there's quite a bit of survey evidence that shows that people would like to use active travel and use public transport more. People would like to have more options. People don't like being sat in their car all the time and sat in traffic. So it's not as sticky a subject politically as people sometimes think.
We're in a changing world, and I believe there's a sort of on these sessions want to be part of the positive change in different ways, and it's great to have all these ideas. Tristan, we've got your hand up. Have you got time for one more, Jules?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can stay for a few more minutes. That's
Yes,
fine.
Jules, thank you for a very interesting talk. I just wondered whether you're involved in where we are as a country with the idea of intelligent road taxing for cars, because as you say, the cars is the big enemy. So we need to make it more expensive. And if you used intelligent road taxing, you could penalize the long journeys you were talking about, and also getting into the Cotswolds. You know, you'd have a lever to help people move to public transport.
Yeah, logically, it makes complete sense. I mean, there's also the issue of there's going to be a big black hole in the public finances, the public purse, as vehicles do shift to EVs, which needs to be filled with something. Surely that needs to be some form of road pricing or intelligent taxation, as you say, so people are paying as they use their vehicles. Rather than all the part of the problem at the moment, as we alluded to earlier, is all the problems with all the costs, with driving. It's very front loaded. Once you've got a car, it doesn't cost you very much to use it, as opposed to using.
So what's happened to that debate? Is that still being considered? I know it was ruled out about 10 years ago when they started talking about it.
I mean, that's the problem. On paper, it makes a lot of sense, but I think it is regarded as being very politically difficult. And so I can't see it happening in the immediate.
But do you campaign for it as an organisation?
No, it's not really part of our remit. Okay. But we work closely with Campaign for Better Transport, and it is part of their campaigning to call for for measures like this.
But I think it's a big issue because, as you say, it's front loaded. So I've now got an electric car and I'm very inclined to use it because it's so much cheaper than getting on the train. So, you know, I need an incentive to make it financially better.
Yeah, and it's an issue that that actually the projections are that the more electric cars we have on our roads, we'll actually have more and more traffic because of exactly the point that you've just made. The point of use becomes free, so pretty much. So yeah, it's a really difficult one. But yeah, we're not directly involved in campaigning for that, but yeah, we have friends in other organisations that are.
Thank you.
Good to know. I've got to take this opportunity. I see you've got your hand up, Linda, to say very much thanks to Jools for the talk, but also to everybody present. We've had some really engaging discussions and points coming out. And I think this whole issue of transport and electrified transport is something we're going to be returning to over time and regularly, I suspect. Belinda, you've got your hand up. If Jools, don't feel embarrassed about saying you have to go, Jools, but Belinda, what was your point?
It was just to say very quickly that to agree with your last point, that actually a lot of people, I think we fear that people are more kind of worried and hostile because there is a bit of loud kind of pushback and political pushback. But I did a sustainable transport event yesterday to encourage people to input into our local transport plan, but also to talk about we've got a proposal in Lyme Regis for a 20-mile-an-hour zone. And I did get a lot of people complaining about one particular issue, which they'd misunderstood from social media, getting it all wrong. But in general, I've been through all the feedback forms this morning, and from the feel in the room, in general, people have got much more radical ideas than the town council is daring to kind of suggest. And talking, you know, the businesses are even on board with the idea of pedestrianising part of the street, and yeah, lots of people are quite keen to find alternative ways of moving around and just making our lives much more well, just safer and more manageable, away from all the huge volumes of traffic.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think people see that traffic has gone up and up, and they don't want that.
No.
And I think when there is if there is a backlash, it's often because people think their mobility is going to be constrained in some way. If we make sure we approach it as a, you know, actually we want to improve people's mobility, people's ability to get around in different ways, that kind of melts away. But I think it's a good point about often people come up with really quite innovative and sometimes radical ideas. So sometimes we think about community engagement as being about empowering communities, but actually by listening to communities, sometimes it can empower us as local councils to be more progressive and more bold in the way we conduct ourselves.
I can never get the people who oppose it to come to these events. That's the problem. I'm keeping trying though.
You're singing our song there, Jools. Yes, let's get councils and communities working more closely together. Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it's a great session today. I think Graham may want us to stay a little bit longer today. Anyway, those of us are able to talk about future topics and so forth. We can talk about that. But as I heard earlier this morning, it's that one problem with these online sessions is we can't give a huge resounding round of applause to our speaker. But on behalf of everybody here, thank you very much, Jools, and we will certainly keep in touch with you as we go forward. Well done. Thank you so much for joining.
Nice to see you. I will dial off now.
Brilliant stuff. Take care. Take care. Oh, great. What a great time. Graham, I think obviously a lot of the things we've been talking about today are going to come back and so forth. You've put something in the chat about, would anybody here present like to suggest one or more topics for the immediate future, and even better, people that might speak to them?
Including particularly next week, I have a gap, and I've also suggested that we could discuss what people want to see as a change on the website. I think there'll be a lot of interesting views on that, but we may not feel that we're ready for that yet.
I think that session is going to happen at some point. I mean, I can. Would you like me to show up that slide that I've got to show people what we're looking at? Would that help?
Of course. But
if I can put you in the chair, then back in the chair, Graham, to talk about other topics, I'll just dig it out from my my machine.
Well, we could also just check to see whether anybody would be interested in discussing the website, or was that a no-no from everyone who's on the line at the moment?
Sorry, discuss the website now?
No, as a topic for one of the banter sessions.
Gosh.
Well, there's one from Amanda, thank you. And sort of Belinda.
Belinda's going to get to see it anyway.
Well, I think from the sound of it, we're not ready yet.
No. Just to give a quick thing, the Great Collaboration website, the points, the things that are there in black are already up on the website. A lot of it is about individual actions. The bits in green are what we're looking at in increasing, adding to the website. A lot of it is around collective actions and more different kinds of feedback, not just for individuals, but also particularly for parish and town councils. We're looking down, obviously, this business about getting more people involved with each other, as well as the things that are going on. Yes, training courses, action planning. There's things about data. We're going to be talking about digital mapping is going to be part of the development. Obviously, we're going to have links to these banter sessions and recordings from the banter sessions on it. Once we've got through those, then we have it's about walking the walk as well as talking the talk. We're wanting people to get more engaged with the council, get more engaged with their communities. The reverse is also true, and we need to support community groups as well. So at the moment, there's a button on the website for local councils, but we need one and a similar level of resource for community groups as well, we're feeling. In due course, we're looking to have perhaps something for businesses as well, but that's what we're looking at the moment. It's on my desk to put some of these actual new pages up. People have a look at it. I may not be able to get them all up, Graham, by next week, but that's just a quick snapshot for everybody as to what the changes are looking like at the moment.
Thank you. I was actually hoodwinked by Kara's wonderful article about whether it's better to keep your 18-year-old diesel going and going and going, or should you get a new EV? So that was too fascinating to miss.
Okay, well, we will save obviously all these points to the chat. Yes, Cara, if you're not careful, we'll be tapping you on the shoulder to do a presentation at some point in the near future. You lucky person. But okay, well, I'll stop sharing that then a bit. But that was just an illustration of where of what Graham was referring to.
Graham, have you got the list of future banter sessions?
I do, yes.
Available, because it might be worth
That's quite a good idea. Yes, let me see if I
Checking
can
that.
dig it out.
Well,
Yep.
I think Belinda's on one of them, isn't she? Yes, indeed. Yeah.
That was partly why I was asking.
I'm trying to remember when
Making sure I've got it in the
You're
diary.
down for the 6th of March, Belinda. So if I can share my screen.
There's a lady I know in North Yorkshire who's involved with a wind turbine, a wind energy project with a local parish council up there. So that will be something at some point. Right. So who have we got? Okay.
So we've got nothing for next week, but we do have Belinda for the week after. And then the topics down on the bottom down here, I've got lots of suggestions, but no volunteers to speak about them.
Yeah. Well, we can hopefully get somebody on community energy quite soon. That's what I'm talking about. Amanda, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah. I put in the chat. Remember that Michaela Cryer from Unity has offered to speak.
Oh, that's true. Yes. Thank you very much.
So it depends on when when you've got a slot and when her diary's free. But she's sort of raring to go when we've got a slot. The other one was just going back to the database. National landscapes. Do you have a button for those as well? Because I would love to deposit the our grand master plan, the route map to zero by 2050. And there's quite a lot where the strategic overview is kind of bigger than a local authority.
Yes, indeed. Yes. We've got, as you see, there's well, I've called it case studies at the moment. I think if there are going to be templates, guidance, examples, that's very much part of what we would like to share. If you want to whiz it, you've got my email, Amanda. If you want to whiz it across to me, then I'll have a look at it, by all means.
I'm just waiting on getting that permission and
Sure.
then putting it in. But my point is then, if it is within our scope, then maybe somebody presenting on that would be a possibility. Because there was trying to remember the name of the organisation. It was down in the southwest, but they did a kind of a baseline report on what we needed to. It's not the how to get there, but the what we need to do if we are going to get there by 2050 for the whole country.
Yep.
And then what we did as a national landscape, that's the leading edge work, was to then contract a consulting firm to work with us and to do the work that said what our route map might be. So what our route map might be would be a different solution to what others might be, but there'd be a lot of overlap. So it's leading edge in the sense that no other national landscape has yet done it, and the National Association of AONBs, as it used to be, National Landscapes now, are looking at what we've done by way of rolling it out. So it's likely to be something that any parish or town council within a national landscape is going to become familiar with, and helps to provide a strategic overview for the strategic bodies that are your county councils or your unitary authorities. Yeah. So I think it's a helpful model to see at early days.
Thank you very much. That's very handy. I can report back from the local net zero forum, which by chance I happen to be the only town and parish council representative on, that there seems to be no real energy or appetite to produce a joined up plan for how the nation achieves net zero. What are the things that can make most difference? How do we achieve it? I've got 2 or 3 ideas why they may not be doing that. They're frightened of embarrassing ministers. They worry they might be excited by the cost and whatever it is. Anyway, happy to talk some more about that in a minute. Belinda, you had your hand up, and then Cara.
Yeah, it's just I was just trying to find. We went to a little sort of supper recently, but it was run by Octopus Energy, and it's something to do with community renewable energies. And it's the very, very colourful wind turbine that sort of travels round and and then they invite people to come and say, is this something that your community would like? And there's a name for it. I was just scrabbling around in my emails to see if I could remember it, but they might be worth inviting to do a talk. So it's the turbine that was at Glastonbury, and it's called Gusty something Field.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's very engaging, but I'll try and find out.
I think that may be something that Michaela is part of, because
could be.
she's jointly employed by Mid Counties Co-op, where I'm a director, and Octopus. So
okay,
and
could
it's
be.
the organisation that is that bridge between our organisations is called Unity, and it has lots of different projects, of which I think this is one of them, the one that you're talking about.
Oh, well, that sounds like a good way in. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I need to leave, but I just wanted to make one very quick suggestion, which is hedgerow mapping as a topic, because I think that's got huge potential. It's quite easy to make hedges. They've got massive potential to be improved, but I haven't found any parish that knows how to map them effectively. And there's an organisation.
Tristan, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put you two in. I'll put you two in touch offline. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry to have to leave. Thank you very much.
It's all right, Tristan. Thank you for seeing us. Cara.
Thanks. I think there was a roadmap for net zero by 2050 by the CCC that was given to the government that they binned. So there is something out there, but it needs to be revived. And I think as part of that, it's really important that we've got community engagement, because otherwise we're not going to achieve it if it also feels like it's a kind of top down being told what to do. So just thought I'd make that note. And also to say, maybe looking at local area energy planning might be a good one. So Somerset has done a version of it because we couldn't afford a fully fledged one. But that could link in as well to what Octopus and other community energy groups are doing through Energy Local, which we need to advance and create a local social tariff in order for us to then say that we want to buy all our energy from renewables, and it enables more of them to go into the grid, because at the moment infrastructure is preventing it. So but energy planning would be a good topic.
We're certainly, when we're doing the digital mapping on the website, we're going to put in the good spots and the bad spots for linking into the national grid. I mean, government is quietly trying to catch up with trying to make them all good spots, but it's going to take a while. Is there a name you can give us for your local area energy plan?
Gordon Graham is the head of the Energy Systems Catapult.
Who? Sorry?
Gordon Graham.
Okay.
Is the head of ERIS, the Energy Revolution Integration Service at Energy Systems Catapult. And it's the Energy Systems Catapult that work with local authorities to develop local area energy plans. But it costs.
It's so expensive that we could not afford it. And we're a large council. So we had to make our own version up, and we worked with Regen to help do that high level mapping. Right. But there's also CSE. They do a lot of work in communities. They've got a wonderful workshop that they will help support deliver, will give you the resource to do so. So again, it's about how do we engage our communities from a very grassroots level for people to go, oh yeah, I've got a space that I think a wind turbine would be really good, and it's got good wind resources, and starts that kind of ground up, so that we have community involvement and community buy-in into renewables as well is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a community energy landscapes they call it, isn't it? Isn't that
correct?
Right?
Yes, Andrew, that's the one. Very good.
There's so much stuff. I mean, you know, we're all up against it in terms of gathering this information, reading it. But this is very much what the Great Collaboration Project is about: is gathering this stuff and getting it out as clearly and as quickly as possible. And these sessions are very important to feed into that. Very much so. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Great. So there you are, Graham. We've got a good half a dozen ideas there, and I think all of those ideas need to be on the program somewhere. It's just a question which one can manage it for next week. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it is fascinating, this thing about funding as well, because if there are people, you mentioned Catapult, it doesn't matter who they are, who can do X, whatever X is, but it costs a lot more. What about other ways of doing X? Are there other ways of laying track? I don't know. I'm talking out the top of my head now. If there are other ways of achieving things that can be done, perhaps if they may be done more with community involvement than actually paying a lot of money to somebody, who knows? I recently met a lady called Natalie Bennett, who's now, I think, Baroness Castle, ex-leader of the Green Party. And she's publishing a book, which some of you may already know, called Let's Change Everything. I'm not to keep in touch. It's coming out this spring. She was originally from Australia, so perhaps she's able to say some things that people she can't quite say. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I must get back in touch with her, because I think this is what we're boiling down to. Eventually, there's going to be so many changes, and the question is, what is the roadmap? How do we get there? And more to the point at the moment is, how do we engage people in order to join in the march to get there? There's so many elements to it. There's so many aspects to it. I'm fascinated to see what Natalie is going to put in the book. Also, last time there was a general election, the Green Party did put forward an alternative spending plan, a government spending plan for what the budget, might look like. I believe they'll be doing the same again this time. The idea about the public purse and its shortage of depth has been vaguely asserted, but we're not getting any figures or anything really based on the actual numbers. Whether that's going to change in this general election, I don't know. But I have found a site that tells me that 10% of our national income is going on servicing, in other words, paying the interest of the national debt. And so, and that has gone up quite a lot, of course, since COVID and all of those bits of expenditure. So there isn't a bottom in this purse, but I'm hoping that the governing parties perhaps don't like to share this stuff so much, but I'm hoping we'll get a bit more of a debate about that, at least during the general election. Anyway, there we are. And there are a lot of organisations, particularly at the district and county council level, are getting ready to campaign and help people campaign during the general election on various green issues. We're very much engaged in trying to keep things going, develop things, share good practice on the ground. But a lot of those level councils' actions, yes, there are organisations, UK 100 and all the others, they seem to be very much focusing on the next general election at the moment. So I'm very pleased that we're still trying to keep the flag flying at the local level, doing stuff. Great. Well, I think we've had a great time. Just go on. If there's any more anybody would like to say, any more from you today, Amanda?
No, I just said thank you for another excellent banter.
Okay.
Always a pleasure. Always learn lots.
There we go. Stuart, Cara, Jacky, Jim,
very good.
No more.
I'd like to thank Cara for all her web links.
Oh yes, thank you very much, Cara. Yes. Do please keep coming, Cara. We will miss you when you're not here. I mean that in a very, very positive sense.
That's very kind. I do tend to talk and I'm very opinionated about these things, but and I'm not at the parish council anymore. But when I do and I can come, I thoroughly enjoy it and like to help share information from both sides. It's great to also hear what you guys know too, which is
we do need some debate, and we do need the skills and language and points to make in debates. So we mustn't feel embarrassed about making strong points. That's great. Amanda.
Yeah, just a quick one. Cara, when we were thanking you there, it just reminded me that everybody makes great points, and I don't necessarily know where everybody's from. So although we introduced ourselves the very first session, as you make more and more points, I get a sense of where you're from, but I don't know the organisation. So could we maybe share again where people are from as well as the names? Would that be helpful?
I would find it helpful. It depends how many people turn up on at each time, but Graham does have all our contact details. Yeah.
But it's a good point, Amanda, and it's bad of me because normally at the end of my Zoom name, I do put Environment Somerset Council, of which I kind of sit professionally. So that is where I'm calling from today.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I was in a pub in Somerset many years ago. There's a big old bloke there with a mug of cider in his hand, wearing his coat and hat indoors. He says, "Think about Somerset, living around here. You can live as long as you like," he said. Lovely bloke. Great memories of Somerset, one of my favourite places. Graham, if there's no more to say, I think we can say thank you very much, everybody, for today. And
indeed.
And as I always say on these occasions, let us go forward together. We will never surrender.
Bye all.
Bless you.
Bye.
Good night, John Boy. Yeah.